If authorities have brought charges against you, they may have done so in numerous ways, and it's super important for you to understand how the prosecutors will bring the charge and what steps you could be doing to build a mitigation strategy in ways that will help you get the best possible outcome. Now, obviously, you don't want to be charged at all, but nobody can change the past. All you can do is deal with the future, deal with the current situation, and then start building a pathway that will put you on a trajectory for a better outcome. And the sooner you start, the better off you're going to be. But let's talk about one of the more common ways that prosecutors in the federal system bring charges. It's through an indictment. Now, an indictment is brought after members of a grand jury agree to return an indictment. So the prosecutor will convene a group of people, and those people will listen to evidence that the prosecutor orchestrates. Now, there's no defense attorney there, so they're just listening, and the actual jurors can ask questions of the witnesses. And after the prosecutor feels that he's brought all of the information possible, he's going to ask the members of the grand jury to return an indictment. Now, there is a lot of cliches that prosecutors can indict anyone they want because there's no defense. So they can actually scale the message or put the message in such a way that grand jurors are going to give the prosecutor what he wants. Now, there's another way that you could avoid an indictment if a charge is coming, and that is if prosecutors work with your defense attorney and persuade you to accept a plea agreement, which would mean you might plea to a criminal complaint or criminal information. So that spares the prosecutor the trouble of having to convene a grand jury and put everything together, and it delivers them the conviction, which is what they really want. But what you want is to position yourself for the best possible outcome. So people who go through a plea agreement typically get a better sentence than those who are convicted by a jury. I had a grand jury convened against me. The prosecutor was able to persuade the grand jury to issue an indictment for a very serious drug offense, and I went to trial, and I paid a very heavy price for that. It's what resulted in me getting a 45-year sentence. Well, actually doing the crime is what got me the 45-year sentence, but had I participated or pursued a plea agreement, I would have served significantly less amount of time in prison. And in my case, I made the wrong decision because I knew that I was guilty. But at the time, I just didn't understand the seriousness of an indictment. And so what are the key parts? Well, it's going to have a caption and a case number that all authorities will look at for the rest of your life. It's going to have the counts, and that's how many charges, those counts are how many charges the government brought against you. It's going to cite the statutory citations. So Congress passes laws, and then there is a statutory code called the United States Code, where the elements of the crime exist and also the potential penalties. And then there's the factual allegations in the indictment itself. So it's like a summary of the conduct that the government claims to be illegal, and it is often incorporated by reference across multiple counts. Okay, like I was charged with a severe drug offense called continuing criminal enterprise. That was count 1 of my indictment, but I had numerous other counts as well. And each one of those counts includes the statute, and then it talks about what are the elements of the offense. So those are the specific facts that the government must prove beyond a reasonable doubt for each charge. Okay, every crime has the elements of that crime, and for the continuing criminal enterprise, the elements that of the crime that prosecutors had to prove was that I was a leader of an enterprise that distributed cocaine, that I supervised or oversaw the actions of 5 or more different people, and that it involves substantial amounts of money. So every crime has an element like that. And the prosecutors are going to have the burden of proving it beyond a reasonable doubt. But I'll always remember what my judge said to the jury during the early part of the trial. They said the prosecutors have to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. But he said that doesn't mean all doubt. You could have a little doubt and still convict. So you have to kind of have this idea of the courtroom setting. Some judges are different. I interviewed a judge named Judge Bennett, who he would step down from the bench and he'd go over and he'd shake the defendant's hand before the trial, and he'd look at the jury and say, I want you to know I'm shaking the hand of an innocent man. He's innocent until you say he's guilty. So it's a very different experience than my judge, and I can't tell you what kind of judge you're going to get. All I can tell you is that you've got to be thinking today about the challenges that you want to overcome in the future. So I've described overt acts. I've described my particular crime. A lot of crimes include a conspiracy, which is an agreement between two or more people to commit a crime, plus an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. I don't think it's a crime to say, hey, let's go sell drugs if that's all you do. Or I don't think it's a crime to say, let's create a scheme to defraud other people. But that's just talk. It's just talk until there's an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. If I say, let's go defraud other people, and then I write an email that describes how we're going to do it and I share it with somebody, well, that's an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy, and that person may face a conviction for conspiracy. So an overt act is any action, lawful or unlawful. It's not illegal to write an email, but it's advancing the conspiracy. And then the intent. Most federal offenses require proof of criminal intent. It's called mens rea, in addition to the act itself, which is Actus Reus. So these are legal terms, but these are good things for you to be thinking about if you're interacting with a defense attorney. Now, some of the common federal charges include wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, drug cases. All of those are typically federal crimes. Even bank robbery is a federal crime. Why? Because banks are insured by the Federal Depository Insurance Corporation, which makes it a federal crime. So the indictment, it could also include forfeiture counts, which could seize property that's linked to the alleged crimes. And that could be your personal residence. It could be your bank account. So understand all of the collateral consequences of a crime and figure out how you are going to launch the best defense. Now, indictments can always be amended. A grand jury indicted me, but while I was waiting in pretrial detention, they did what's called a superseding indictment, adding additional charges to the indictment that made it even more severe. That's some of the ways that they apply pressure. They could also add new defendants. It's not uncommon for the prosecutors to indict a husband and then pressure him, and when he doesn't plead guilty, bring an additional indictment, supersede the indictment, and indict a family member. So be aware that prosecutors are going for a conviction, and you have to be thinking about what's the best decision you can make. So this is all just a process, but it's the indictment is a pretty good sign that things are getting worse, that you're getting deeper into the problem, and you've got to be thinking about a effective mitigation strategy. So what are the next steps that you should take? So the indictment is not a finding of guilt, it's just an accusation. And you will have to decide, each person who's charged will have to decide how they're going to respond to that accusation. And they're going to need a good defense attorney and a good strategy that will help them. You're going to have to, I would encourage you to be honest with your defense attorney, create a good plan to work together, but make sure that you understand all of the ramifications. And you don't want to discuss this case with anybody other than your attorney, because you might find that the people with whom you discuss it can take actions intentionally or unintentionally that make matters much worse. So I would encourage you to use our resources at Prison Professors. We have a chat bot right at on the homepage of every site that we train continuously, and you could ask it any questions. We are always updating that with hopes of helping you. I don't think that any of you need to hire a prison consultant. A lot of those people that masquerade as prison consultants are just charlatans who spent a few months in a single minimum security camp, and they want to fancy themselves as experts. But the reality is you are the expert. You are the expert of your life. And you could work with a defense attorney. You could learn everything you can, because everything we offer at Prison Professors is 100% free. But you've got to invest the time and the energy to learn. Now, I understand that sometimes you're going to want to have a guide to be by your side. I would just encourage you to be very circumspect if you're going to hire somebody. I'm not available for hire in any capacity because my main area is focusing on the macro system and changing the system so that more people have a pathway to earn freedom through merit and to move on with their life through the efforts they make to atone and reconcile with society. And I offer all of this information for free. I make 3 promises. I'll never lie to you. I'll never ask you to do something I didn't do. And I'll never charge anybody a penny for any of the information that we offer for free on prison professors. But sometimes people need a guide, and I understand and respect that, but I would only recommend one person. That's Justin Paperny, who is the founder of White Collar Advice and a sponsor of our website. He hosts weekly interactive webinars at whitecollaradvice.com/nonprofit. And those are for members of our community, and you could ask your questions there if you need to. But I can assure you, if you just spend the time on prisonprofessors.org, you're going to find a lot of information that will help you make better decisions. My name is Michael Santos. I believe in you.